First story. I'm a gardener. I'll never forget what happened to me. Hello, my name is Mike, and I've been doing garden work for about 15 years. I have never had any abnormal jobs other than your typical creep who wants you to watch you trim the hedges. Other than those types of jobs, my 15-year career has been normal until a week ago. I got a job from some rich executive who has a hobby for gardening and shrub art. He had a nice mansion not too far from Los Angeles. I usually work in the Bakersfield area, but the pay for this job was too high to decline. It was only about an hour-and-a-half drive, so it was totally worth it. I arrived at the house in front of these fancy silver gates. I walked over to the intercom and pushed the button to call inside. It was silent for a few seconds until a voice came from the other end. "Hello there." "Yeah, hi. I'm here for the gardening job." "One moment." A few seconds later, the gate slowly opened. "All of the equipment is in the little shed right of the main fountain ahead of you. The owner has left you a note on the table in there." "Okay, thank you." I walked into the property and turned towards the shed. I crept open the old wooden door and entered. Inside was a bunch of gardening equipment that I was to use for my job. There was a little wooden table in the corner of the shed. On top was a note written on a piece of crumpled loose leaf. The note had an old coin resting on top of it. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. Then I started to read the note. "Hello, I am the homeowner, Mr. Glensworth. I have left you this note to make sure you do the finest job you can on my prized shrubbery. Before you get to work, there are a few rules I need you to follow. 1. Make sure the blades of the saws are fully secured before starting. I want very precise cuts. There should be no wiggle room for the blade to move. Fair enough. 2. Never enter my house for any reason. I don't care what the situation is. Do not enter. The only time you shall enter is if Rule 10 applies." Sure. 3. If an older, balding gentleman wearing a suit exits my home and tries to talk to you, ignore him. Just continue with your duties and he will eventually wander off. Strange. 4. If you hear someone call your name, you didn't. Just ignore it. Is this some sort of joke? 5. At some point during your time here, my dog will approach you. If his tail is wagging, rub him on the head until he walks away. If his tail isn't wagging, drop everything you're doing and leave. You will still be paid for your time. Do not under any circumstances refuse to pet my dog. It will be angry. This dude is a creep. 6. If a maid asks you if you would like anything to drink, decline. It will try to poison you. 7. If you hear a screech coming from the forest, get inside the shed as fast as possible. Sit down on the floor and close your eyes. Stay in that position until a second screech is heard. It will get you if you do not. What the fick is this guy talking about? 8. There's a chance that a limo will enter my property. If this is to happen, enter the back of the limo. Try to remember the path you took. It will take you to a random location within a few miles of my home. Once you get dropped off, try to make your way back. If you get lost, then the best thing for you to do is pray that your death is quick. Death? This better be not be some sick ficking joke. 9. If a man approaches you claiming to be me, then kill him. That is it. Do not kill him if he says rule number 9. That is the real me. It's rare that the real me will be there, so make sure. I don't like this. 10. This rarely happens. In the case that all the staff comes running out of my home, you need to enter. Find a bathroom and look in the mirror. 10A. If you see yourself, then exit the home and continue your duties as normal. 10B. If you see no reflection, close the bathroom door and be completely silent. If it enters the room, do not react or move. It may circle around you. Whatever the case, do not react at all. It'll eventually leave. Once it leaves the bathroom, look in the mirror again. Repeat this process until you see yourself in the reflection. This can't be real, right? I placed the note in my pocket and grabbed my gear. I headed out to the first shrub and started to work. About 10 minutes in, I heard my name in the distance. I was about to look, but I remembered rule number 4. Horrified, I continued to clean up the shrub. About an hour went by and nothing unusual happened. I was around 20% done with the job when I heard panting behind me. Suddenly a loud bark made me jump and yelp. I turned around and saw a golden retriever with a purple collar, his tail wagging steadily. I put the saw on the ground and started to pet the dog. 5 minutes passed and the dog didn't move. After about 10 minutes, he stood up and walked away. Finally, I thought. As I watched the dog happily trot away, I saw an older, bald gentleman in a suit hastily walking in my direction. Fear washed over me. I quickly picked up the saw and got right back to work. I heard the sound of footsteps stop behind me. "Excuse me, sir." His voice sounded like how you think a British monarch would speak. He repeatedly spoke that phrase for about 7 minutes when he finally stopped. I heard him stroll away. Relief hastily washed over me. I continued to do my job. Some time passed without any event happening. This has to be some TV prank, right? I thought. Just as this left my brain, an elderly woman tapped me on the shoulder. It really spooked me. I quickly gazed towards her. Her wide smile was unsettling. "Would you like something to drink? A water, maybe?" Her voice was frail. I was really parched and could definitely go for water, but I knew what would happen. "No, I'm okay, thanks though." She turned around in a perfect 180. The smile never left her face. I was curious as to where she was going to go, so I watched as she walked away from me. When she got to the fountain, I expected her to turn right and head into the home. But she never. She kept walking straight towards the woods. When she reached the edge of the property, her head quickly flicked in my direction. She was now staring at me. Her smile now faded. I jumped and quickly turned around. I took 1 or 2 deep breaths and looked back. She was gone, as if she faded out of existence. Now I was really creeped out. I started to get back to work. At this point, I was about halfway done. I kept working, knowing that every branch I cut got me closer to freedom from this hell. As I finished a shrub, I heard a loud screech come from the woods on the other side of the property. It was similar to an elk call, but stayed at the same pitch for an extended period of time. I dropped the saw while it was still on and made a break for the shed. I slipped on the grass a few times before I reached the shed. I shut the doors, sat down, and closed my eyes. My heart was racing at 1,000 miles. As I sat in the darkness, I heard scratching at the door of the shed. Suddenly, another screech blasted through the property. I heard something quickly shuffling away. I stood up and opened the shed door. For a split second, in the distance near the woods, I saw a black blur fade away into the trees. I was frozen in place. After about 10 seconds, I snapped out of it. I got back to work, my heart still racing. I was almost done with my job when the roar of an engine blasted behind me. A limo slowly peeled into the property. I sighed. I dropped the hedge trimmers I was using and walked towards the limo. As I opened the door, I peered up at the woods. Standing behind a tree was the maid I saw earlier, smiling again. I got spooked and practically jumped into the back seat. I shut the door. I felt the limo begin to move. I looked out the window as we did a U-turn. "Remember the path I take," repeated in my mind. The ride totaled about 10 minutes. I had a basic idea of the path we took. I started to walk back to the home. After about 30 minutes of walking, I saw the opened silver gates. A sigh of relief came out of me. This hell was almost over. I could see the remaining shrubs in front of me, only about 10 more. I started to trim a shrub when I heard a door swing open. I looked behind me and saw all the staff run from the home, out into the woods. I quickly sprinted toward the front door and entered the house. I ran up the fancy staircase and started opening every door I could see. Finally, I came across a bathroom. I sprinted in and dazed into the mirror. Nothing. There was no reflection. I slammed the door shut. I slowly backed up from the door and stayed still, being as silent as possible. After about 2 minutes, the golden doorknob started to twist. The door swung open with aggressiveness. Then I saw it. It looked like a normal human. The only difference was it was completely naked, about 8 feet tall, and didn't have any facial features. It was just smooth skin where there should be eyes, a nose, and a mouth. It crept into the bathroom slowly. My heart felt like it was going to pop out. It started to get closer and closer until it stopped. Its face was about a foot from mine. I felt like crying, but I knew that would be a death wish. It started to circle me slowly and steadily. It circled me about 5 times. Then it crept out into the hall, then down the stairs. I slowly turned around to face the mirror. As I peered over my shoulder, I could see my own eyes wide open, staring back at me. The relief washed over me like a tsunami. I eventually exited the house and returned to my duties. The last shrub had 1 more branch to cut. I pushed the saw against it. I watched it fall to the ground. I unplugged the saw and watched the cord bounce on the damp grass. As I looked up towards the fountain, I saw a man walking towards me. I froze in place. He came up to me and introduced himself as Mr. Glensworth. I was relieved to see him, but then rule number 9 phased into my memory. He didn't say rule number 9, I thought. I quickly picked up the hedge trimmers from my belt and shoved them into its head. It didn't bleed. It just fell to the ground like a rag doll, still smiling. I stepped over its body and started to walk towards the fountain. I pulled out the note to make sure I didn't forget anything. I went over the note and I thought it was done. That's when I spotted a small arrow in the bottom right corner of the note. I flipped the note over. On the top line of the page, there was one more rule. 11. You must throw the coin that was on top of this note into the fountain before leaving. Once thrown, a taxi with no driver will pull up in front of the gates. Get in the back seat and close your eyes, then count to 10. Once the countdown ends, open your eyes and you will be inside your own car. Once this happens, you are relieved of your duties. I took the coin out of my pocket and stared at it. I threw it into the fountain water with a flick. Behind me, the sound of a car horn blasted through the street. I turned around and there, parked by the gate, was a cab. I headed up to it and got in the back seat. I shut my eyes and started to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I paused, then said the final number, 10. I waited another few seconds, then I opened my eyes. I was pulled over on the side of the road inside my car. I peered over at my GPS. Just above the little car icon that showed my position read the words, Bakersfield. I was home. This happened about a week ago. I haven't really been able to sleep. I can't get the image of it out of my mind. I'm writing this post because I need some closure. Has anyone ever heard anything remotely close to this? I can't find the mansion on Google Maps anywhere. Am I going crazy? Did I dream all this? Was I drugged? I don't know, but I'll never forget what happened to me. Second story. My life is in ruins after a paranormal experience at a roadside motel. Right off the bat, I want to get this out there. I do not believe in ghosts, or did not, that was, until my experience last week. Now I'm not too sure. What changed my mind? My night at a creepy roadside motel. I guess by definition, all roadside motels can be described as creepy. Nearby highways, dimly lit parking lots, shady characters hanging out of doorways smoking. And the one me and my girlfriend stayed in last week where I had this paranormal experience was no different. A place well and truly stuck in the 50s called The Lodge. We found it just off the I-95 in the middle of Maine. We were on our way to Canada to attend a wedding in the province of New Brunswick and were driving because 2 weeks earlier my girlfriend had had the great idea of taking the scenic route, basically because she hates flying. Why not? I had thought at the time. What else could be more enjoyable than a nice summer drive up through Maine? It turned out that a lot of things could have been more enjoyable. For the scenic route came with a lot of rain, and not much else. A storm coming off the Atlantic pounded us the moment we left Boston. The music in our car accompanied non-stop by the swishing of windscreen wipers. We had been due to stop at the night in Portland on the coast with a friend, but that morning he had called to say his mother in New York was sick, and he would be spending the weekend with her. Never mind. Why don't we stop somewhere else for the night? And that is where the roadside motel comes in. It was just before sunset that we pulled into its parking lot. Over the noise of the storm, I asked, "Is the place abandoned?" Which was not an unreasonable question since half the doors and windows in the U-shaped courtyard were boarded up. My girlfriend simply pointed to a small office, where a neon light flickered that read, The Lodge. Just below the sign, through a dirty window, sat an old lady behind a desk, watching us. I got out into the rain. Flashes of lightning zigzagged across the black sky as I jogged between the little rivers forming on the broken tarmac. Between the rolling thunder, you could hear the drones of the passing vehicles on the nearby I-95. Upon my entrance into the office, a room which smelled of a mix of cigarettes and mothballs, the old woman merely stared at me, her eyes hollow and lifeless. "Are you open?" I asked, water dripping from my coat onto the stained carpet. The old woman did not say anything, only continued to watch me with her hollow eyes. Then, like she had been considering my request, began to nod slowly. "Okay, how much is a room?" She rose from the chair, placed on the counter a set of keys, which had the number 66 attached as a tag. "Okay. Yes. At this point you turn around, get back in the car and hit the highway." It was that part in the horror movie where the lead role finds a staircase descending into darkness, and yourself, from the safety of the audience, are screaming. Don't go down there. Stupid. But what do they always do? They always go down. I suppose it wouldn't be such a great story if the character slams the door shut and leaves the killer waiting in the dark, twiddling his thumbs. Would it? But I digress. At the old woman sliding the keys forward, I got out $20 and waved it in the air like a white flag. $20 for the night? The old woman nodded and pointed at the keys. I glanced out of the window towards the car. Lightning momentarily illuminated my girlfriend in the steam-up car, nervously watching me. Should we stay here? I turned back round to the woman and grabbed the keys. Thanks, I muttered, and headed back out into the rain. Upon entering the car, I dangled the keys in front of my girlfriend. Friendly woman, I said cheerily. Though she said business was quiet tonight. Yeah, just a bit, my girlfriend replied, looking round the dark courtyard. It's kind of creepy here. Why don't we head straight on to Canada tonight? Nah, should be fine. I shifted the car in gear and trundled it over to near room 66. One night won't hurt us. Famous last words. Surprisingly, room 66 was fairly modern. Whitewashed walls, a widescreen TV, refrigerator, clean ensuite bathroom, potted flowers, mirrors. It almost eased our nerves of being the only guests in this run-down motel during the middle of a storm. Of course, there was a door, a locked door that is, at the back of the room, which at the time we assumed was a small cleaning closest. I tried the handle and afterwards forgot all about it as we each took showers, then settled into bed. My girlfriend, who would have been able to take a siesta on the edge of a cliff during a hurricane, fell swiftly to sleep. But for me it took much longer, tossing and turning until I finally drifted off. I woke around 2 a.m. and that is when the funny business started. It began with a noise on the roof. Now it wasn't the pit-patter of rain upon the flat roof. No, it sounded like footsteps, as if someone was pacing up and down. Okay, I thought, it's a bird. There is a bird on my roof. It's just a bird. Yet the more I told myself that, the more frantic the steps became. Until suddenly they stopped. I lay underneath the sheets, listening. The rain had ceased, and the storm moved on, but still the howling wind whipped around the courtyard outside. Relax, I told myself, and got up to go to the toilet, using the dim lights in the parking to guide my way to the ensuite bathroom. Now, it was as I was in the middle of my business that the door to the bathroom, which I had purposely opened to full extent, began slowly creaking closed by itself. My initial reaction upon seeing it in my peripheral vision was that the ground must be uneven. But then my brain began working on overtime to determine if the door had done that earlier. No, it hadn't. We were on perfectly flat ground. So now I'm doing my business in a race against time against this slowly creaking door. And the bathroom, having no natural light, is in near total darkness. And that is when my heart starts beating fast because I have a very strange feeling that there is someone stood in the bathtub, no other than a little girl, watching me. The moment that door closes, I know that I am toast. And I would have my throat ripped out by whoever, or whatever, is standing there. In the last moment, I lurched for the door and jammed my fingers between the gap, flicking on the light switch. There was no one in the bathtub. It was just my imagination. I stood there panting, my body covered in a thin layer of sweat. I put the door back into its position, fully open, and waited for it to move again, disproving my theory of the perfectly even ground. It did not move a millimeter. I moved it into another position. Maybe it was the angle you had to get right for it to move. No, it remained in place. Okay, that's creepy. I turned the lights off and returned to bed, where I lay motionless, staring up at the ceiling while my heart pounded in my ears. That is when I saw a silhouette move past the window outside. It was a faint silhouette, but all the same, something did walk past. I sat up, watching the curtains and the dim lights in the parking lot. It could have been the old lady from the office, maybe checking on something. The old lady who never said anything and accepted my $20. Hey, I said, shaking my girlfriend awake. No time to act brave now, no sir. Request dismissed, sir. Hey, Emily, I continued, shaking her harder. Wake up, god damn it. But she just lay asleep, or unconscious. I felt a plunge of fear. And that's when the parking lot light went out, casting the room into total darkness. Wake up, Emily! I wanted to scream, but no words came out. And then I heard a key being placed into the lock of that door on the other side of the room, the one that we had assumed was the cleaning closet. And the key slowly began to turn, until the lock clicked. And even though I could not see it due to the darkness, I felt a draft of cold air and knew it had drifted open. Oh fick, oh fick, oh fick. I'm thinking, sitting there next to my unconscious girlfriend, shivering with fear. "What do you want?" I called out feebly. I was answered by the flick of a light switch, revealing that what lay behind that door. It was a corridor. There couldn't be a corridor, though. The motel was a small U-shaped courtyard of single units. There was surely not enough space. Yet right before my eyes was a secret passage. I got out of bed. Yes, that's right. In my PJs, I got up and started inching towards the corridor. Why? I don't know why. Something was drawing me in. It was like my body had a mind of its own and was taking me towards the corridor. "No," I croaked, trying to convince my body to stop. I could only control the neck muscles. However, so I turned to look at my girlfriend in the bed, to try and plead with her to wake up and save me from the imminent disaster that I was soon to befall. But as I turned my neck, I quickly found that she was awake, watching me with hollow and lifeless eyes like that of the old lady at the desk. "Hey, Millie," I stuttered. She rose her finger to lips, shushing me. Then she grinned and blood spilled out of her mouth and ran down her chin. "What the fick?" I never got to finish the sentence because the force that was pulling my body had brought me into the middle of this secret corridor. On either side, it ran off into darkness. There were other doors that lined the passage, doors which all had the number 666. Then, out of the darkness, one end of the corridor began to glow red. It grew brighter, and strangely, I could feel a throbbing, like somewhere down there was a beating heart. I turned my head away, and as I did, I glanced back into my room, where I saw that my girlfriend was now standing beside the TV, her body slumped, her face hidden by her hair, as if she was possessed. "Emily!" I tried to scream, but yet again, no words came out. The corridor glowed so brightly now I could feel the heat on my skin. The next part was the worst. From behind the doors that lined the corridors came the sound of voices. People I knew. A friend who had passed away long ago started calling my name, beating against the door with his fist. He calling to me to let him out, telling me it was my fault he died. How long I stayed in that corridor for I don't know. It might have been a minute, maybe a day. Who knows, maybe I'm still trapped there. Perhaps in one of those rooms, waiting like my friend for the next victim to be ensnared in the trap. Somehow, however, I don't know how, I found myself back in the car, driving down I-95. I was shaking violently, and my girlfriend lay in the passenger seat unconscious. I pulled right off the highway and made it to the nearest town, where I collapsed at the front door of the nearest house, babbling incoherently about demons and witches and corridors and motels. It's been a week now, and my girlfriend is still not awake. That night, she was airlifted to Maine Medical Center, where it was diagnosed that she was in a coma. I gave my statement to the police about what happened at the motel. They don't believe me. Of course they don't, would you? An officer told me that the lodge closed in the 60s after a father murdered his whole family there one night. But that's my story. Emily's family are here in the hospital and are refusing to speak to me. They think I tried to murder her. I rang my folks, and they flew out a few days ago and are with me now. My dad's been sorting out a lawyer because he heard whispers of myself being charged if Emily fails to wake up. I'm sharing this account because I don't know who else to turn to. Maybe I'm mad. But I experienced something dark and disturbing last week in that motel.